Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Divine Alignment. I have a very special guest with me here today. I have Ashleigh from Back to Basics. Welcome, Ashleigh, to the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to have you here and be joining. And you have such an incredible story and path. I'm really excited for everyone to hear just your journey and your really like what you offer to the world. I know that when we connected, I was just like blown away by everything that you have gone through and overcome. So, do you want to just start there? Just your background and like what led you to Back to Basics and a little bit about your health journey because it's really so incredible.
Sure. Well, that is a good starting point because this moment of my life, this health crisis really transformed me. It transformed the way I look at the world, the way I look at humans, the way I look at the body and healing. It was like a complete 180 from how I used to see things. So in my early 20s, I ended up getting really sick really unexpectedly. I was seemingly very healthy my entire life. I was very active. I was a cheerleader and a dancer and had just graduated from college. And all of a sudden, I started all the systems of my body just kind of started shutting down one by one. And it started with a breathing issue that when I went to the ER, they didn't diagnose it as asthma. They couldn't quite figure out what was wrong with me. So they're like, oh, here, it takes some prednisone, come back if it gets worse. Like, okay, that'll fix everything.
Sure. Thank you.
So the next day it's worse and I have a new symptom. I suddenly had vertigo. So I was so dizzy all the time. It was getting worse by the day. It got to the point where I couldn't even sit up to have a conversation or eat a meal. I had to lean against something to try and stabilize myself. It was just so nauseous and dizzy all the time. And from there, things just really escalated really quickly. It was like that one breathing symptom just snowballed into this whole thing of me not being able to leave my house, not being able to walk anymore. I had to use a wheelchair to get around. I couldn't take care of myself, obviously, couldn't work. I couldn't drive because of the vertigo. Like my life had completely changed in the matter of a few weeks. And I didn't have much of an understanding of alternative medicine at the time. So I was relying on what I had known and been exposed to and what most people do. So I just put myself into the conventional medicine system. That first trip to the ER kind of was the thing that started it all. And then I'm going to see doctors and specialists. They're doing blood tests and CAT scans and MRIs, trying to figure out what's going on with me and what could possibly be affecting so many different systems in my body. And as they're doing all this, I'm continuing to go on undiagnosed. And because I don't have a diagnosis, I can't get treatment. That's how our system works. You have to be diagnosed with something in order for them to prescribe a medicine to you. So as I'm going along, I'm just getting worse and worse and worse without any answers. And it started to get pretty scary. Looking back now, it's like I don't even remember being scared though. It was more like I was just so depleted. I like had no emotion towards it. It was more like apathy than sadness or fear. And I'm very fortunate to have a mother who is very intuitive, and she's just naturally spiritually aligned. She didn't have much of a spiritual practice at the time, but just like was so innately that way. And she's really what got me through it. She's like, there's got to be a reason for this. There's got to be a reason. We'll figure it out one day, but this isn't the end for you. And just because of her persistence and perseverance and positivity, it led us down this path of real and true healing, and led us to a point where the view I have of the health and the body and everyone around me has changed too. So at a certain point, after going through seeing all of these specialists and doctors and endless appointments without any answers, my aunt had recommended this homeopath that she had heard of. And at the time, I really did not know anything about homeopathy. Like I said, my knowledge of alternative medicine was very limited. And I was like, I don't care what she does. If she could heal me, like, I'm all in. I remember telling my mom at the time, I was like, yeah, I don't care if she sprinkles fairy dust on me. If it works, it works. Like, I had zero concept of what was going to happen in this appointment. But she was so impacted with clients at the time. She's like, I can't take you on as a client, but I will give you as much information as I can to try and help you and at least guide you into a direction. So we're like, we'll take whatever we can get, like any different perspective we are open to. So we went over, and luckily she was in Marina Del Rey, really close to where I was in Los Angeles. We saw her that day, and she blew my mind. In the course of a few hours, the things she was saying just made so much sense intuitively. It's like I have these moments that I'm much more open to now, and I understand a lot better. But this was one of the first ones that her telling me about homeopathy and this other way of looking at the body hit me just like, that's truth. Like, I don't even need to know anymore. Like, that is truth. I can feel it in every cell in my body. And so fortunately, we had such a heart connection when we first met that she's like, I am not letting you leave here until we figure out what is going on with you. And years later, like, she would have never said this at the time, but after working with her, she's like, yeah, I was just so scared that if you left my office that day that you wouldn't survive. And she's like, I wasn't going to let you leave until I did something about it. Thank goodness. So we sat there for 5 hours straight. She like stays up with me into the like wee hours of the morning to figure out like everything that had happened to me, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually from birth until that point in my life. And no doctor had done that for me. No one I had spoken to through that whole crisis had ever looked at it in that way. It was all like, okay, we go to this specialist because of or we go to this pulmonologist that's top in his field, and that's for your lung issues. And then we go over here to this neurologist that he's very sought after. We go to see him for the vertigo. But they never had a conversation. They never talked about how could this lung issue be affecting this brain issue or this neurological issue? How do these intertwine? How are they connected? It was all so piecemeal. Like, this is a separate issue from this, yet it was all happening within the same body. It was all happening to me. And homeopathy is a very holistic type of medicine. So you're looking at the mind, body, and spirit all together as one. You're also looking at all of the symptoms that you're experiencing at the same time, your totality of symptoms. You're looking at all of this within the same picture. So it's not all pieced apart of like, how do we use this pharmaceutical drug to change the levels to get this to change? And then, oh, you also have this issue, so we need a separate pharmaceutical drug to get these symptoms to change. But now we have a side effect, so we need this pharmaceutical drug to try and correct that. Homeopathy was none of that, especially my homeopath's approach. All she was looking at was the root cause. Like, what is causing all of these symptoms to happen in this one individual at the same time? And that just made sense to me. Like, yeah, why are we trying to deal with, like, fuddle around with all of these surface level symptoms? Let's get to why those symptoms are happening in the first place. If you take away the cause of the symptoms, then you get well. You don't even have to worry about those symptoms. And I think we're so trained, especially with conventional medicine and here in America, I think we're so trained to look at symptoms as the enemy. They pop up and we want to get rid of them immediately. We want to squash them by any means possible. But instead, and with this new framework that I was looking at, with homeopathy, we're looking at symptoms as little signposts, like our body giving us signals like, hey, this is what's going on. This is what's wrong with me. Can you help me? And when you look at it from that perspective, those symptoms are such amazing clues and such important information that we don't want to just squash. We want to listen to, and that will direct us to what that root cause is. So if we can just start to wrap our heads around that and start looking at our bodies that way, there is a path to healing and there is a path to wellness. And that's what I really saw in my experience in working with this homeopath. Like, from that first day, I mean, there was already such healing from somebody just listening to my entire story and to caring so deeply. And then in that first week, homeopathy, for those of you that don't know much about it, homeopathy is a very specific type of medicine. It's very individualized. So anyone who comes in, let's say, for example, 10 people have the same diagnosis. They all come in with a breast cancer diagnosis. Now, all of them got breast cancer from a different way, potentially, from different lifestyle choices, from different genetics and how those are playing with the environment. Like, there's so many different factors for how they got that. Now, it's also true that they're expressing that disease in different ways. So with homeopathy, we wouldn't just give them all the blanket same medicine. We would give them each a very well prescribed and very individualized treatment, depending on how they acquired that disease and how they're expressing it. So my homeopath did the same thing with me. She's looking at everything I'm experiencing at that moment. She didn't care that I didn't have a diagnosis, because we weren't relying on that. We were just relying on my body's expression of what was happening through the symptoms. So she compiles all this information, finds a well-prescribed remedy, and in giving that to me, by the end of that week, I did not need the wheelchair anymore. And after a month of working with her, all of the life-threatening symptoms were entirely gone. And I was blown away and quite impressed and so grateful at that point. But I also was so curious, like, how far can I push this? Like, how far can this really go? So I continued to work with her for a year. And by the end of that year, I was healthier than I had been in my entire life. There were things that I, throughout my life, had seen as, oh, that's just how the body works. So that's particular to my body, but I've just learned to deal with that. I know a lot of women feel like, oh, painful periods, like that's just something we deal with. But that's not the healthy state of your body. That's not how we're supposed to operate. And I learned all that from working with her over that year. I'm like, oh, I don't have to live with these things. Like, that's not normal. Like, I can actually reach a higher level of health and really optimize my body. So after a year of that, I was talking to her and she's like, you seem so interested in this. Like, why don't you go to school and actually learn so that I can mentor you and you can take on clients? And at that point, I was looking at it. I had a completely different career path in mind, and I was looking at it all very selfishly at the time. Like, I had just gone through this health crisis and I never wanted to experience something like that again. Mainly, what I had felt is so unempowered and so confused and so lost. Like, when you're looking at yourself and not knowing where to turn and what could possibly be causing all of these symptoms in you, you just feel like anything could be causing it, and you don't even know where to begin to look to correct what could be the causative factor. So I agreed that I didn't need to study it, but it was more for, like, I never want myself or my family or my future children to experience anything like this. Like, I'm going to set up this little protection for myself so that I never have to do this. And of course, the universe works in such beautiful and mysterious ways that through that and going to school to get my doctorate in homeopathy, I started collecting all of these people that really needed help. And not all of them were as severe as my case. Some were more severe, some were less, but some were just people trying to prevent anything else from happening, or trying to fine tune, like how I was kind of at the end of that journey of my health crisis. But all of these people really were looking for answers and looking for a different way to approach healing and taking care of their bodies. So as I started collecting all these people, I all of a sudden had a very full-fledged practice, and one that got to the point of having a 1.5-year wait list to even talk to me. And it got very overwhelming. And it also felt like the weight of the world on my shoulders. Like, all of these people are in a position that I was in, and that was so close to home for me after just having experienced all of that. And I knew how desperate they were for answers and for a different path, but I just could not help everyone that needed help. And it felt unfair. It felt like everyone deserves, like, anyone that wants this deserves access to it and I can't work any harder. I was starting to get sick again from just working around the clock, not taking care of myself. And at that point, I started to think there must be a way to work smarter and not harder. Like I can outthink this. Like there's got to be something that can simplify it. Like even though it's so individualized for each of my clients, and each of my clients takes so much of my time, I wonder if there's a through line. I wonder if there's a common denominator that can tell us something that's universal for everyone. Like, is there something that really is affecting everyone and destroying people's health in some way? And as I started to look at that, and it was interesting in my practice, I practiced the same way as my mentor did with bioenergetic testing. And that gave us such an insight into what people were really going through. So I could take a DNA sample from my clients, I would use hair samples, and I could test that DNA sample to anything. So I could test it against a food that they thought they might have an allergy or a sensitivity to. I could test it to a pharmaceutical drug, to a supplement, to the homeopathic remedy I was going to prescribe them, anything. And I could get so much information just from that to see how things were going to affect them before they were introduced into their experience, or if they already were introduced, how it was really affecting their vitality. Was it raising their vitality, lowering it, or just leaving them neutral? So after years of practicing, I had this database of information of all the different things that people were using in their lives. And I wasn't sure that I was going to find anything that was really a common denominator, because everyone's so different. But what I started to see is that there were certain chemicals that we are exposed to in our daily lives that were detrimental to every single person that I tested. And that made me think, okay, this is not so individualized. Like there is something here that no one should be exposed to. Like there are chemicals that we are exposed to daily that are just destroying our health. And the more I looked into what chemicals these were, there weren't things that we had no control over. Like, it's difficult to go after the manufacturing plant down the street that has chemicals billowing out of the smokestack and tell them to stop doing it. Like, that's a little tougher. I mean, goals, but still. But the things that I was looking at were things that we were choosing to put into our own lives, that we are buying at the store and putting in, on, and around our own bodies. And that's what was mind-blowing to me. And mind you, this is over 10 years ago, when clean products weren't really a big part of the conversation. So as I'm looking at this data, I'm like, how can this be? There's got to be somebody looking out for us, telling them not to sell products like this, that these things are toxic. And the more I researched and looked into it, I'm like, oh wait, there's no one. Like there's not some government agency testing everything on the market. It's up to us. And we need to educate ourselves to protect ourselves from these things. And looking back at my health journey and then all the data from my clients, like I was so affected by all of the chemicals that I was around, and so unknowingly affected. Like if somebody had told me these things can make you sick in these ways, I wouldn't have bought them. I wouldn't have used them in my home, but I just didn't know. And what you don't know, you don't know. And it provided this a suboptimal environment where I was just held in this place of my body being so taxed all the time that it couldn't heal itself. So I am such a big believer that our bodies are hyper intelligent. We don't even know what they're capable of and what they're doing on a second by second basis. They are healing us constantly. That's what these little symptoms that they keep popping up for us, like that's what those are telling us. Like, I'm trying to heal myself and you're making it very difficult. This is what needs healing. And if we give our bodies an environment where they can heal, they will. But so many of us are putting our bodies in environments where they're constantly being forced to detox and expend so much energy on just trying to maintain a baseline that they never get the chance, they never get the time to actually heal. So that is really what led me to back to basics. I was seeing with my clients that even after giving them this information of your laundry detergent is the direct cause of this rash and the insomnia that you're experiencing and the chronic migraines that you're having, like that information wasn't enough, because then I would send them to go to their local natural grocer and they would get a new laundry detergent and be like, great, I fixed the problem. And I would test them for that one, and wait, this is just as toxic as what you were using before, the conventional brand. Like, how can this be? It says it's natural, but no, you look into the ingredients and they're using half the same ingredients, take out just a couple toxic ones and call it natural. And that was disheartening, but it also showed me that people really needed more information than just go try a natural laundry detergent. So with Back to Basics, I really aimed to curate all the products that truly were safe, that we were doing in-house testing on, that I was bioenergetically testing, that we were talking to the manufacturers to really learn where they were sourcing those ingredients from, and to study every ingredient to know that all of these products were actually benefiting people's health and not destroying them. So that's been the aim of Back to Basics from the beginning. And it comes from a very real experience that completely altered my life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And such a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. It really is. I see like so much of myself too. I have such a similar journey of like not as severe as you. Absolutely. I mean, everyone has their
Yeah,
own.
that's what I've found in my practice. It doesn't matter if somebody has a cold or somebody has cancer, like you are miserable and I want to help you get well. Like it doesn't matter the varying degrees. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I too was going to all of these specialists, like a specialist for this and a specialist for that. And I'm just like, as I hear you sharing this, this is something that I actually see and witness quite commonly. And I feel like it's happening more and more is people are getting sicker and sicker and going to more specialists and more specialists, and it's really challenging, like as we, I don't believe, like I think all of these doctors, they become doctors because they want to help, like they're
yeah.
not trying to hurt people. But I think that it's just our system needs a new way of like really looking at the body as like this this whole microorganism that like everything is communicating, like things are not just compartmentalized systems.
Yeah,
So
that's step one, is like having this holistic view that I feel like so much of conventional medicine is really missing the mark on. And then another part that I see conventional science really grasping that hasn't been translated to conventional medicine yet is this energetic messaging that happens within our systems. Like this energy is not just some woo-woo thing that we're talking about on the fringes anymore. Like there's real bioenergetic information that's being passed in our systems all the time. And if we ignore that in the realm of healing, then we're really missing the opportunity to heal from a deep place. And so much of conventional medicine with pharmaceutical drugs, and even a lot of times with supplements, you're looking at the biochemical level. And yes, you can tweak levels here and there, but there's this bioenergetic level that tells the biochemical level what to do. So why don't we just focus there, and then everything else will get corrected without us trying to tweak it? Like I said, our bodies are so intelligent, it can do it itself. Just give it the opportunity to.
absolutely. And our bodies, I'm so firmly believe our bodies do know exactly what to do and exactly how to heal. And that makes me really excited when I see these sciences now like focusing on energy and how we can like really harness working with that deeper layer, because everything is energy. And so otherwise, and I find I was doing this and I see so many people doing this of just like playing with like the surface level symptoms, and you're never going to truly find. And I like I'm always reminded at like these bodies are capable of so much, like we don't even realize how much these bodies are capable of. I'm curious, and only if you feel comfortable sharing, were you able to like really discover what it was for you that that was causing everything in the first place?
Yeah, so it's a little complicated, but when I was in college, I was a cheerleader, and during one of our big games, I was dropped on the top of my head on the court. Yeah. And that at the time, I was in so much pain that I was focused, like we're talking about, just focused on the symptom. Like I was just focused on the pain and managing that. And I didn't know what else it had done to my body. And I didn't really have a system to even figure that out in the first place. So I mean, all I could do was focus on the pain. So over that next year, I was just finding ways to manage, and I would go to a chiropractor. It'd give me like a little bit of relief for a minute, but not really. I figured out if I put a TENS unit on to run an electrical current through where it hurt and prop myself up so I slept sitting up, essentially, that I could sleep that way, fall asleep that way. So I it was all there. And when I was going to the doctors and specialists, I was telling them all about this incident that had happened, and none of them took it to mean anything to what I was experiencing with this health crisis. Like, oh, that was a year ago, it couldn't possibly be related. And so I started to believe that, and then I stopped telling people about it when I go to the doctors. So but what I have come to realize now is that that incident, the falling on my head, was kind of like the chink in my armor. Like all of the other pieces were there, all the chemicals that I was being exposed to were already there, but my body was kind of handling it at some level. But then that injury, which I have seen with so many of my clients now, is that an injury can really open you up to whatever else is there. And that's how the cascade of symptoms started to happen for me. So that injury opened this up. And then over that next year, things started to come up that I didn't really take too seriously. Like I started drinking an insane amount of water. And when I mean an insane amount, like I would have to have 2 32-ounce Nalgene's. I mean, that's a problem even right there. I was drinking out of plastic. But every night I would have to have 2 of those next to my bed to get through the night. And I would wake up throughout the night and drink it without knowing it. And I'd wake up in the morning and they'd both be empty. I could not go a half an hour without drinking a 32-ounce bottle of water when I was awake. And I was like flooding my system with water, but it's like my body couldn't absorb it. So another thing was I started tripping a lot. And I had always, like I said, I was a dancer. I had always been very coordinated, and I would like laugh it off. It was my senior year of college. I'm like, oh, that's weird. I just tripped up the stairs. That's strange. But never really thought, oh, it could actually be related to that head injury that I had. And my body's actually shutting down little bits at a time. So it wasn't until a year later that I made this move after college to LA that everything really hit very suddenly. And looking at the full picture now, the environment that I had put myself in LA really is what sped up the process of allowing all the symptoms to come to the surface. So yes, a lot of the health crisis was linked to this head injury, but there was so much more involved in it. Like I said, it was just like the catalyst for the rest of it to emerge.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so common, and like something I want to offer for everyone listening and watching is like, this is so common, is like these seemingly like just random or small or even not small things that happen in our lives. Like it's like those kind of open up our energy to then continue to attract and continue to like, then things, it opens up this thing for multiple things to continue to happen down the line. And then, I mean, as I hear your story, I'm like, this makes total sense of like that you received that traumatic brain injury and that you would be having then vertigo and like all of these, like it totally makes sense because our body is always talking to us and this is how our body talks to us. So it's very common for like, I mean, this is why I like started getting so passionate about Chinese medicine too, is like Oh, like the body's actually very literal. So like it makes total sense of like you fell on your head and so then you start having like neck and like of
Yeah.
course because the body's talking to you, right?
Yeah. And drawing attention to those areas that really
Absolutely.
need help. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've seen too, and I love that you're offering this approach to it of like working with the bioenergetics of it and especially like how you did homeopathy too, of because I've seen it with just the subconscious mind and like you know, with hypnotherapy and whatnot, like people have these seemingly very like small things that would happen in their childhood or throughout their lives, and you know, like someone said this random comment to me, or someone like I someone made fun of me at this point in my life, or this happened with a friend, like these things that seem so random and so simple, but like those can lead to health complications or things with how we act and operate years down the line. So I think that this
That's what's so wonderful about homeopathy too, is that it takes all of that into account as well. It's not just the physical. It's like those traumatic emotional experiences that you're talking about, those hold energy, and our bodies hold that as information. It stores it inside our bodies. So to be able to release that in ways, and homeopathy really works as like, I always think of it as like an energetic message that you ingest that tells your body how to heal itself, and it does that on the physical realm as well as mental, emotional, and spiritual.
absolutely. And that's what I think is so cool about really this time that we're living in is there are multiple ways to go about healing and treating. And I think that homeopathy is such a beautiful tool because as you kind of mentioned and alluded to, like supplements, and I I I I try and personally stay as far away. By the way, this is not medical advice, anything in this episode, but I personally try and stay as far away from pharmaceuticals. I think there's a time and a place for them, but they're kind of, I see them as absolute last resort. And and I think that where the opportunity lies here is how do we work with energy in a way that the body simply aligns. So
Mhm.
as yeah, so I'm curious too, did was it just that traumatic brain injury, or was that were you like eating well? Because you said that you had all of these other toxins. I'm just curious. Like,
Yeah, so I'd say with my mom being so intuitive, she had started us like eating our organic so far before most people were. So
yeah,
that piece of it I had, but going away to college, there were definitely a lot of things that like my mom would see and be like, "Oh my gosh, what are you eating? What products are you using? Like this is crazy." But no, I was definitely using a lot of conventional products. And in seeing what I had to detox with homeopathy, it was very apparent what was causing the harm. So once I got through the remedies that were associated with the head injury, there were a lot of other things coming up. Like my endocrine system was very out of balance. So my hormones were all over the place, which can cause a lot of different crazy symptoms for us. And so much of that was linked to the chemical exposure. So the laundry detergent I was using, the air fresheners that I would spray, like all of these things that my mother intuitively knew I shouldn't be using, that I was. And yeah, it was kind of this cocktail of things that really led to the downfall.
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I know. I was just having this conversation with a friend yesterday about like she had to buy like a conventional cake mix for her son to do like a science project. She's like, I'm not gonna buy organic for this. And she's like, how do people eat this? And I was like, and I had just gone for a walk in the forest and I'm walking by all of these people and I'm like, uh, how do you not smell what's on your body? Because ever when I went to naturopathic school, it was no fragrances allowed on campus. And
Mhm.
I just stopped. And I wasn't really using, I mean, back in high school, I used like, you know, the Victoria's Secret stuff.
Yes.
And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I like
How on
walk,
earth?
yes, I walk past someone who like has it on and I'm like, I'm like start coughing because it's so intense for my system because I haven't smelt it in so long. So
So
yes.
we see this a lot of times. I'd see it with clients, and then now with Back to Basics, we see it with a lot of customers where they actually regain their sense of smell once they're not exposed to synthetic fragrance.
Yeah.
So synthetic fragrance is where so many manufacturers can hide in a lot of toxic ingredients just under the word fragrance. There can be so many things hidden under that word. So what you see a lot of times is like the person that starts with like one air freshener plug-in, and oh, it smells so nice to them, but then after a couple weeks they can't smell it anymore, so they need another one. And then you walk in and they have like 10 plugins in one room, and it's because they are so overexposed to the fragrance that it starts to deaden their sense of smell, and they like literally can't smell it anymore. It's the same thing that goes with, like you're talking about, with people with perfume. One spritz was good, but now they can't smell it as strong. It's because it's like all in their environment, it's all in their nose all the time, so then they need more and more and more. And it's amazing how your sense of smell will come back when you reduce exposure to all of that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say actually the same goes for our food as well. I think that's why we're having like people are
Oh,
having so much sugar because it's like our bodies are like becoming desensitized to these things that we're consuming in such high and physically ingesting and just having on our skin and in and around us. So do you want to share just you had shared when we talked that a few weeks ago about someone's plug-in. So because really our physical environment leads to our spiritual health. Like you
mhm.
can't have one without the other. I really truly, and I know this is like your jam, but um you had mentioned someone who was having like these, and I don't remember what it was, who was having like symptoms and it was like from their Glade plugin. So do you want to share that story if you remember it? And then also like, how do we have or cultivate our physical environment to aid in our spiritual environment?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I in being able to see this whole health crisis I went through so clearly with in retrospect, I don't think it's any coincidence that my spiritual evolution happened immediately after this. Like when we look at our systems, when we look at our bodies, are they're going to prioritize our survival first. And I think we've really seen this evolutionarily too. Like back in caveman days, we really had to focus on how to stay alive and how to get our next meal. Most of us today are privileged enough not to have to even think about those things. Like we sit in front of a computer and our food gets delivered by Instacart, and like we're just so well taken care of. But it does allow space for further evolvement in other areas. But we are taxing ourselves and forcing our bodies to operate in this survival mode in other ways. Like anxiety definitely plays into this. Like that's leaving our bodies in this fight or flight reaction mode all of the time, and it's wearing our systems out, it's wearing our nervous systems out. And also forcing our bodies to stay in detox mode all the time does the same thing. So that's another way of telling our bodies, like, you're not safe, you're having to fight for your survival on a minute to minute basis, and that doesn't allow room for spiritual involvement or anything else. So I think after my health crisis and really transforming my health in a deeper way than I had seen previously in my life, it all of a sudden opened space to be able to explore these other areas. And like having this mental clarity that I gained with homeopathy too, I started to read different types of books, and like Power of Now was my gateway drug into like the whole spiritual side. And like I would just start finding these books, and like, and also not coincidentally, they would line up in the perfect order so that I could expand in a way that my mind was ready to understand this now. And the book would come in like gifted by a friend at the most perfect time. And so that is definitely something that we want to keep in mind, that we need to give our bodies the environment to thrive so that we can take this next step spiritually too. And the client that you're referring to, I have so many fragrance stories. I can't even remember what that specific one was, but I think it might have been the one I was telling you about that had been using dryer sheets. And so that's another big source of fragrance that people have, where they are coating all of their linens, all of their clothes, their bed sheets, their towels in these petrochemicals. And a petrochemical is from petroleum, it's an oil, and oil coats things and it doesn't come off easily. You can't just rinse it with water and it will go down the drain. Like, you really have to scrub it to get it out. But that's why these manufacturers of dryer sheets and other fragrances put it in there, so that it is long lasting. It does stay. It has staying like scent power. So I had a client that had been using dryer sheets and he had known to clean up a lot of the other things. He had changed his laundry detergent, but just like hadn't given up those dryer sheets yet. And he was suffering from really extreme depression and suicidal thoughts. And we would use a homeopathic remedy and he would get well for a little bit, but then the symptoms would return. And we kept going through this pattern. And in homeopathy, we call this finding the obstacle to cure. There was something that was preventing him from getting well. The remedy would work, but then something would interfere and create an obstacle, and then he couldn't get fully well. And in using bioenergetic testing, I was able to take him through his home and see where his vitality dropped in his house. So we're taking him through, and all of a sudden he walks down the hall, and I'm like, what is right there? Your vitality just tanked. Where did you buy? He's like, I'm just in the hallway. There's nothing here. And I was like, okay, like put me on FaceTime. Show me exactly what's there. Okay, what is behind that screen, that door right there? And he opens it up and it's the laundry. He's like, yeah, but here's the laundry detergent you told me to use. I'm like, what's that box right there next to it? Because, oh, just the dryer sheets. I'm like, okay, that is tanking your vitality. And in removing that one thing from his life, the remedies were able to work. He fully overcame his depression. The suicidal thoughts completely went away. And he was able to take that next step, like that next step of evolvement because of that. Like, from it, looking at it, it's like such a silly thing. Like, don't buy the dryer sheets. Like, that seems like such an easy step. But if you don't know it could be that detrimental, if you don't know it could be directly related to one of your symptoms, you might not think to do it. So that's really where I try and put my efforts, and where I really stay focused on my mission, is to share that with people so that people aren't unknowingly making themselves sick.
Yeah. And I think unknowingly really is the key. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I first started learning, like, oh my gosh, like, why are these things at the store if they could make me so sick? What if they're making everyone so sick? And that's what's like really hard and I struggle with. Just that we have these things that, as we shared earlier, like our bodies are meant to heal. And I believe we're all here to and have access to these higher spiritual capabilities and psychic abilities. But if our body is stuck in fight or flight and constantly detoxing all of these things, it's going to be so much more challenging and may not even happen, because it's just trying to keep you alive, as you shared. And so where do you recommend people start with, if they're like, okay, well, like, I think everything is like clean and healthy around me, because as you also alluded to, a lot of these things like appear as clean and they're not. And obviously you have an incredible line, Back to Basics, to share with people. But like, if someone is like, well, I think I'm doing all the right things, but perhaps like, but I'm still not feeling my optimal, like, where do you recommend people start?
Yeah, so that's the thing we really try and stay focused on, is that so many people are either in that camp of like, I think I'm doing everything right, or there's the people that are like, I don't even know where to start because everything's toxic. So why would I even start down this journey? And to those people, I always like to share about our toxic burden. and that we all have a threshold. And it's not just that some people are affected by these toxic chemicals and others aren't. We really all are. It's just everyone's expressing them in different ways. So for some people, they have surpassed this toxic burden threshold, and now they're exhibiting symptoms and disease from it. Then there's other people that are under the threshold that are still being affected by it. It is still in our systems. Like things you put on your skin are going directly into your bloodstream. It's hitting your major organs. Things you're putting into your mouth are going through your stomach, same thing, into your organs. Things that you're breathing into your lungs, into your bloodstream. Like it's not that we're just around them and then we breathe it in and expel it immediately. It's really getting absorbed in there. And the people that are able to clear it immediately, I actually think they're the more fortunate ones. And people are like, oh, they have a chemical sensitivity. It's like, no, their body is just saying, like, I don't want this in here. I need to get it out immediately. And I'm going to show you how. The people that are in the environment of having the million plugins and the conventional laundry detergent and the 500 candles burning, they think that they're not being affected by it. It's not really true. It's just being affected in a different way. And a lot of this is being stored in their organs too, which is something we don't want. And once you hit that toxic burden threshold and your filtration organs become overly taxed and aren't able to expel the toxins as quickly as you're putting them in, that's when you really start to see the problems. So for anyone that's looking to make a change, whether you've already started down this journey or you're just beginning on it, we really like to focus on cleaner than clean because it can replace so many different products that you have. And we've really made it to make it easy on people. I'm a mom and I know how much we have on our plates, like the mental load, the physical load, everything that we're doing. So to keep it simple is really the intent of cleaner than clean. So we made this everyday spray that will replace your air fresheners, your all-purpose cleaners. It is completely safe, yet will clean to the grade of hospital grade cleaners. So it's kind of an oxymoron. Like people didn't think that we could create something that would be this effective, but also so safe that I can spray it on my baby's pacifier multiple times a day and on our toothbrushes, and yet it'll clean the bathrooms and kitchen countertops and everything else too. So I love the fact that you can just grab this and not have to think of what bottle you're even grabbing. It's going to be good for pretty much anything around the house. And it will even deodorize soft surfaces and the air too. So pet beds, couches, it'll clean mattresses, something I never knew how to clean before. Like, what do? You can't send it to like a dry cleaner or something. So every time I change the sheets, I spray it down with cleaner than clean now. Same with my baby's bed. And I don't dry clean clothes anymore either. That can be very toxic. That's a good way to insert a lot of chemicals into your life, is taking it to a dry cleaner. Even the ones that say they're eco-friendly are still using a lot of the same chemicals. Instead, now I just use cleaner than clean to spray it down, air it out outside, and it is good to go. So that's definitely an easy way to make a swap for a lot of different products in your home. And another step you can take is to look at all the products you do currently have. And this is just like a quick and easy hack. You can visit our website to see our swap guides and like to get more details. But this is just such an easy way to at least get started, or to take that next step if you already have started clearing some things out. Look at all the products you have and see if you can find the word fragrance on the ingredients list. You would be shocked at how many green, natural, organic brands are still using this word fragrance. And like I alluded to earlier, that word fragrance has so many different chemicals that can be packed under that one word. And we call it the fragrance loophole, where manufacturers don't actually have to tell you what they're using as their fragrance ingredients. And a lot of the fragrance ingredients are things that if you saw on the ingredients list, I guarantee you would not buy it. There are things like formaldehyde and toxic biocides that are meant as preservatives. There are these petrochemicals and parabens and phthalates and all these things that if you just saw it written there, you'd be like, oh no, I know not to use that. But it's hidden under this word fragrance, so you don't even know it's there. And if a manufacturer is not willing to disclose what they're using as fragrance ingredients, you can pretty much guarantee that there are other ingredients on that list that are going to be toxic to you as well. So for people that aren't chemists and like don't have a really deep understanding of ingredients, I feel like that's a real quick and easy way to just be like, does it have fragrance on the ingredients list? If it does, throw it away, put it down, don't buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, can I pronounce it? Do I know what it
Yeah.
is? Like, if you can't, you probably, if I can't pronounce it and I don't know what it is, I probably shouldn't be putting it on my body, in my body. And yeah, I think, it's like I've been more into like the food and that aspect. And I feel like fragrance is like the equivalent to like natural flavors. It's like
Exactly.
what's a
They're
natural
made from
flavor?
a lot of the same ingredients too. So
Oh wow, that's
yeah,
terrifying. That's
yeah,
terrifying because natural flavors, I mean, I think we know artificial flavors, like, okay, probably shouldn't do that, but natural flavors sounds natural, right? But it's like, okay, but what, oh, that could be 500 different things. That
the same thing goes with natural fragrance too. So when people
Yes.
see that, they're like, "Oh, it's fine then." I mean, there's no one regulating what natural fragrance is in the first place. So, and then another complicated factor with that is that even if they do start with the fragrance being from a natural botanical source, when they start manipulating that and taking it apart, the chemical structure of it is no longer stable like how you find in nature. And you don't know how that's going to affect your body when you start isolating different molecules from that. So it's definitely not something to mess with. And yeah, I think that's the perfect parallel, like natural flavors is to natural fragrance. Like exactly.
Yeah, and I'm really glad too, something that I just want to touch on that you brought up about our thresholds, because
Mm.
I think I I'm not. I've seen with some people I'm really close with. They're like, "You're so sensitive. You're so sensitive." Because I like truly, like I was telling, I like start coughing if I like walk by someone who I'm like in the forest and I'm like totally in my zen, and I walk by someone who's like doused in perfume, and I'm like, "Oh, what? You took me out." And
We're two birds of a feather, Jasmine.
I know, I
We can hike
know.
together.
Oh my gosh, yes, we totally could. Um, and people tell me, well, you're just so sensitive. But that's like, I'm so glad that you brought that up about like the threshold, because we're all being impacted. Like, no one's immune to this. Like, we're all being impacted. It's just like, how are we
Expressing
expressing
it
it,
differently.
and
Mhm.
how are we this is also something that I noticed like with myself too, is like when I started doing like detoxes and stuff a few years ago, like all of that stuff starts coming out of the organs. And I think that that's like something you should definitely like work with a practitioner, and like, so because detoxing is, you need to make sure your pathways are open, your drainage and all of that. But like these chemicals can be stored in the fat storages and the organs and stuff like that. So when it does start to come out, like it's not comfortable. Doesn't feel
Mhm.
good. But I think, like detoxing really just needs to be part of our daily lives, just in the environment that we live in here, here in
Yes, and not creating more of a reason to detox is important
yes.
too. So there's a lot of people that'll, once they find this out, they're like, okay, I'll switch out these things, but first let me use up what I have. It's like, no, you have the information now. Why would you keep adding to that toxic load inside of you and getting closer to that threshold? Like if you tax your organs in that way and you're putting in more than they can expel, then you're going to just tip yourself over that scale a lot faster.
Totally. And it's really one of those things where it's like, I think like you either pay now or you pay later. Like it's
Yeah.
going to
I've
inevitably.
seen that with so many clients too, which is really unfortunate. Yeah, the ones that think, before they started working with me, like had that mentality of like, it's not affecting me, it's not affecting me. And then they end up with, the ones that are storing it in a deeper way that aren't expelling it, like we were talking about, of having that immediate reaction. Like it is given the opportunity to result in a more chronic disease too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, oh my goodness, Ashley, we have so many things I could continue to ask you and continue to talk about. But we're going to put a link below for everyone to get a discount on your products, which I need to get them because I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I not have these? I need to I just think it creating something that is like so universal is so beautiful and so incredible because really it should be this simple. It should be this, like, that is one thing I'm like firmly, that's been coming through more and more for me is simplify, simplify, simplify. And I really
Yes.
can simplify, like the solutions are simple, the answers are simple, whatever we're looking, like whenever it's complicated, whenever there's this many ingredients, like just simplify, just simplify. So we're going to put a link for everyone to get a discount on your products and to your website. And where else can people find you?
Yeah, and on Instagram, we put a lot out, just continuing that education, really getting you to understand why we're doing this for our bodies, why it's important to create this environment that is a safe place for your body to thrive and to heal itself. And yeah, with Cleaner Than Clean in particular, this is our hero product. That's why I keep bringing it up. It's really the intent behind it that it so encompasses my life mission and the mission of our company to give you simple solutions that are safe and healthful. And I just couldn't imagine something, a physical object, like having more of that in it. Our all-star ingredient is hypochlorous acid, and it's actually based on biotechnology. It's something that is in our own bodies. So when we have an immune response to something like an invading pathogen, say that we start to get a cold or a flu, or we get a cut and it starts to get infected and bacteria gets in there, our white blood cells start making hypochlorous acid to attack the invading pathogens and to defend our bodies. So this immune system response is what we mimicked for Cleaner Than Clean. So the only two ingredients in the bottle are hypochlorous acid and water. And it is so safe for everyone because it's something that's already in our systems. It's already in our bodies. And that's why everyone from babies to pets to anybody in between can use it. And all we've done with Cleaner Than Clean is use that exact same ingredient, hypochlorous acid. And that's what it does when you spray it out on your kitchen countertop or anything else too. It's using the same defense system as what we see in our own bodies. And that's also the reason why it's so safe for everyone. We have it inside of us. It's just boosting our immune systems to be around it. And you can use it around pets and babies and adults and everybody in between. And it's just such a great all-purpose solution for anything you need to deodorize or clean. And it really gives the opportunity to lower that toxic burden by getting rid of the things that are going to be a toxic response in your body and just replace it with something that is going to be entirely neutral. And we've also made sure that it is completely fragrance free so that we aren't going to be exposed to more synthetic fragrance. And also that people that do have fragrance sensitivities aren't going to be affected by it either.
Mm, that's so, I mean, like as I hear you talking, I'm like, why? Like, duh. I'm like, why aren't we all using this? Like, as I hear this, like, why would we? It just makes so much sense. And I just thank you so much for bringing something like this to the market because I mean, I love to use essential oils, like lemon and lime and lavender and tea tree and things like that. But I also recognize like some of these are not good for pets, and some of these should not be used with children. And some people do have sensitivities to even essential oils. So,
Well, yeah, and essential oils I kind of look at like a medicine too, because they are so strong. And if you're using a really high grade one that's aromatherapeutic grade, it's like you don't always need the same medicine. So, like if you're diffusing it or if you're using it daily, and even as a cleaner, if you're spraying it daily, it's like sometimes you need it, but not all the time. So that's why I love it with Cleaner Than Clean. If there is an odor in the home, or if you're using it to clean, it gives you a blank slate to start with. And then if you want to layer high quality scents on top of it, like an organic essential oil, then you can, but you're not like trying to cover up smells. Or, Cleaner Than Clean will actually go to the source of the odor and take it apart, so that you're not just covering it up. It's actually getting rid of the bad smell.
that's incredible. That's,
Mm.
yes, like again, I'm hearing this. I'm like, duh, of course.
Yeah, that's what we should be doing.
Yeah, why isn't everyone doing this? Why it just makes so much sense. Like it just like you shared, it just feels like truth when I hear it, like
Mm-hmm.
truth in my body. And that's what I hope for listeners too, that it's like this is the truth is simple. And just like thank you so much for sharing this medicine with the world. Like you've just been on such an incredible journey, and like wow, like talk about just so empowering of like where you started and where you're at now. Like it's so incredible, because it would be so, I know it can be really challenging when we're like really in it, and you just stayed the course and have like created such a beautiful, beautiful story out of all of it. And I know you're helping so many people. So just like thank you so much for sharing your magic and your medicine with the world. It's so beautiful to witness and see. And I'm so excited to have everyone get some of Ashleigh's products. So we'll link that below. And yeah, just thank you so much for coming on and sharing with everyone, Ashleigh.
Thank you. This is so fun.